Mark of the Mad Movie Mark Movie Review. Thank you for joining me as I review the 1947 mystery thriller Odd Man Out.
Your heart's not in this.
Hey, that's not fair. Making movie reviews for YouTube is my passion. This is what I love to do. I am reviewing every movie that has 100% fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes. I will give them all a score of 1 to 10. After I review them and score them, I will rank them from worst to best. I started in the 1920 silent movie era, and now I'm at 1947 with Odd Man Out. This movie has 100% fresh rating from the critics and an 86% fresh rating from the audience. It was directed by Carol Reed, stars James Mason as Johnny, F.J. McCormick as Shell, Kathleen Ryan as Kathleen, Robert Newton as Lukey, and it was the first recipient of the BAFTA award. I do want to say one quick thing before I review this movie that, as with all my movie reviews, there's going to be spoilers. In fact, I'm going to give away the ending. So if this is a movie that you want to watch on your own, you just need to know that I'm going to pretty much summarize the entire movie, and then I will give you my thoughts. So when we first are introduced to this movie, we are in a house with Johnny and his cohorts. We are in Ireland, and he is the nationalist leader. So he has been cooped up in this house for, I believe, 6 months, and they have now planned a new robbery where they are going to go rob a bank. However, this is a big job, and they don't think that Johnny should do it because he's been cooped up in the house for so long. He hasn't been out in the real world, and they just don't think that he's up for the job. But he is the leader, and he takes a lot of offense to this, and he says basically, like, if I want your opinion, I'll give it to you.
Now don't worry, Kathleen. We'll be back in no time.
Johnny, you've been stuck in this house for 6 months. You're not fit for it. Let Dennis go instead.
And then he decides that he is going to go ahead and do this job with his men. So the day has come. They go into the bank. They start doing the robbery.
Harry Jamison, 7.
All right, you can let off your work for a few minutes. Back up there. Back up.
And as they're leaving, someone trips the alarm, and as everyone gets away, Johnny's last, and as Johnny's getting away, he kind of has like this moment where he's a little bit dizzy, and then a cop comes in, and I think it's a cop, but comes in and like tackles him, and they're on the ground, and the guy's all like, "What are you doing? What are you doing here?" Johnny ends up wrestling the guy's gun away from him, and Johnny shoots him, and Johnny's shot also. So they're both shot. Johnny's shot in the shoulder, and the man who was wrestling Johnny is dead.
Get him into the car, quick!
So now Johnny is very wounded at this point. So his men get in their car, and he goes to get in the car with them. But as he's getting in the car, he can't get all the way in because he's so injured. So he hangs out of the car a little bit. They drive as far as they can. So Johnny falls out of the car, and the men contemplate whether they should go back for him or not. There are a few men in the car who want to go back for him, but a few who think that they're just going to get caught if they go back. So they're arguing a little bit in the car, and then they look back and Johnny has like walked away. So they decide that they will just keep driving, and they'll meet up with Johnny in a few blocks because he'll probably be faster than they are because they're trying to find their way around the cops. So they end up driving around, and they don't see Johnny anywhere. Now Johnny finds like an air raid tunnel, and he ends up hiding in there. And while he's in there, he has like a very awesome kind of, he's hallucinating, and he thinks that he's in like a jail cell, and he hallucinates that he's in the cell, and the cop is coming to the bars, and he starts talking like, "Oh man, I had this dream where like I robbed a bank. I got out of prison, I robbed a bank, and I got shot, and like my arm and my shoulder were all beat up." And then he comes to his senses, and the person he thought was a cop is actually a little girl, and he's actually really shot.
Oh, Donald, what a dream I had. Oh. What an outing. I dreamt I'd escaped from prison. I dreamt I was on a raid, robbing a mill.
So he stays in this air raid tunnel for quite a while. Back on the other side, his friends all go to the same house, and they meet up, and they're trying to decide what to do, and they decide that they're going to go out and look for Johnny. because he's their leader and that's what they should do. So they go out, they start looking for Johnny, but they're caught by the police. The police see them, so they run. They decide they're going to go to this woman's house who they know. Now, one of them is skeptical about going to her house because he doesn't trust her, but they end up going there anyway, and they're at the house, and she sneaks off. So Johnny has a price on his head because he murdered someone and because he got away, and she knows this. So she goes off on in the back of the house and gets on the phone and calls the cops and says, "Hey, look, I have some of Johnny's gang here, but and you should come get them. But I don't want any trouble inside my house. So what I'll do is I'll get them outside of the house, and then while they're outside of the house, you guys can do whatever you want with them." So she says, "Quick, you have to leave out the house." And they leave, and as soon as they get outside the house, the cops swarm them. So they take out, there's two of them, they take out their guns, and they start firing, the cops start firing, and they end up dying. Then another one of the men who are looking for Johnny, he runs into this group of kids, and these group of kids are begging him for money, and they're trying to say that they tell him Johnny wasn't caught, no one will ever catch Johnny, and then he sees a little girl standing by herself, so he goes up to the little girl and he says, "What about you? Have you seen Johnny?" And she says, "Yes." And he says, "Great, where is he? Show me where he is." And she doesn't want to show him, but he says, "Well, just point out where he is." And she points to one of the air raid tunnels. And he says, "Well, which one is she in?" And she won't answer. So he goes and he checks all the air raid tunnels until he gets to the correct air raid tunnel. And when he gets there, he sees Johnny. Johnny is in very, very bad, dire straits here, where he's almost going blind. He's just losing a lot of blood. So he tries to stand Johnny up the best he can. And he says, "Look, I'm going to try to create a distraction. And I want you, when you hear 3 shots, because the cops are slowly closing in on Johnny, and he says, I'm going to create a distraction. I'm going to get the cops going one way, and then you go the other way. When you hear 3 shots from my gun, I want you to run to the right." I think it's to the right. So Johnny's kind of out of it, but he agrees to do this. So the guy runs to the left, and he is a really crazy scene where he gets on this trolley car, and he's fighting off all these cops, and then he shoots his gun, and then he eventually gets captured. But Johnny decides to try to go with the plan. He goes to the right. He only gets a few steps before he just collapses on the ground. These 2 women see him collapse, and they're worried that maybe he was hit by a car, or they know he's injured. They just don't know what's going on with him. So they bring him into their house, and they were taught first aid, but I don't think they actually graduated from their first aid class. But they were taught first aid, so they take off his jacket, and they're like, "Oh man, this guy is there's a bullet in this guy." And then they see a gun, and they're like, "Oh, this is the Johnny guy they're looking for on the radio." So they debate back and forth what they should do with him, because one of them, she knows that when her husband comes home, he's going to want to give Johnny up to the cops because it's the right thing to do. But this is kind of the first scene in the movie where there's this real moral dilemma about what to do with Johnny, because yes, he killed someone, but he is a person who is standing in front of, the people see it like there's a person standing in front of me right now who is dying. And, can I deal with the guilt of letting this man die, even though he killed someone else? If I know that I could help him in some way, should I help him and then give him up to the cops and the cops can do what they want with him? Or should I just let him die because he's an evil person who killed someone? This is a big tug, a push and pull that will happen throughout the rest of the movie. And there's some sort of big, at the end, there's this big, moral dilemma about what you would do. So they're deciding back and forth this moral dilemma that they have. And they decide that they're just going to let her husband decide when he gets home. So the husband gets home, and he doesn't at first know what's going on, but then he notices the gun, and he notices that Johnny's shot, and he goes into the kitchen where the women are, and he says, "Hey, this is Johnny. They're looking for Johnny right now." And they're like, we know. And he's like, "Well, we have to give him up to the cops." And they say, we can't give him up to the cops because he's dying. We have to do something for him. Even though he's a murderer, he's dying. and then he hears, Johnny hears them. Now, Johnny is very concerned throughout the movie whether or not, at least up to this point, whether or not he actually killed that guy. He doesn't know. He asks everyone, did I kill that guy? And they all kind of don't tell him. But when the husband's in the kitchen, he says, that's the guy that murdered that guy. And then Johnny finally realizes that he killed someone. Johnny gets up and he puts on his suit, puts on his coat, and puts on his, I don't think he puts on his, he puts on his coat, and he goes to walk out the door, and then one of the ladies goes to help him out the door, and he says, when I leave this door, when I walk out the door, shut it behind me and never think about me again.
Peter out in hundreds looking for
It's
him.
what he is now that I'm thinking about.
Aye, and I'm thinking about the decent man he killed. I have no pity for those fellas, shooting at police in the dark, murdering innocent men at their work.
But he's dying now, Tom.
Close the door when I'm gone. And forget me.
Because, you know, he's realized what he's done. He's realized the kind of person that he is. And he also realizes the kind of position he's putting other people who are innocent, who haven't done anything. So he walks out and he ends up getting into a carriage. It's like a horse and carriage. And he ends up passing out in this horse and carriage. The horse and carriage ends up going past this police barricade, and they say, "Hey, who's in the back seat?" And the guy who's driving doesn't know anyone's in the back seat because Johnny just snuck in there. So he said, "Oh, no one's in the back seat." So he ends up driving his little horse, and when he gets to a certain point, he stops because there's these two people who want to get on the carriage, and they realize that Johnny's there. And he says, "Look, Johnny, like I'm not for you or against you, but you can't be in here because you know I could get in trouble." But he ends up driving Johnny a little bit farther to this like abandoned field type of thing, and he says, "Look, if you live, tell the Nationalists that I was the one who saved you. But if something happens to you, I never knew you." And he makes them get out of the carriage. Now at this point, this guy named Shell, he sees what's going on. He knows that that's Johnny. He knows there's a price on Johnny's head. So he ends up going over to Johnny. He sees him there. He sees him just laying down or sitting down half dead, like in this field area. And he says, "Oh, I have a great idea. I'm going to go to, I think he's like a priest. I'm going to go to the town priest and talk to him and see if he's able to like give me any money if I bring Johnny in, because the priest will want to see him because Johnny's dying, basically." So he goes to the priest, and when he gets to the priest, Kathleen also comes in. She's also there to talk to police because she thinks that maybe he knows something. So they're both there, and he has a bird. He has like a bird cage in his lap, and he's kind of nonchalantly starts to tell the story about his bird, but the bird his name is Johnny. And after a minute, they know who he's talking about. They're talking about Johnny. He knows where Johnny is. He can go get him if they want, but he wants a lot of money.
What will you do with him? Where is he?
But sure, I've told you. I just want to get him out of the corner and give him something to put him right.
And after that?
Well, maybe you don't believe me, but I'm telling you, there's lots of people that pay me a grand price for Johnny.
So the priest says, I don't have any money, I'm poor. And so is Kathleen. But if you bring Johnny to us, you can have something better than money. You can have you can be rich morally. And so Shell doesn't really know what he's talking about. But he says, well, maybe there's something to this. I'm going to go grab Johnny. So Shell ends up having to drop off his bird. So as he's going home to drop off his bird, he meets Lucky, who's played by Robert Newton. Lucky is a painter, and Lucky, it's spelled Lukey. So Lukey is a painter, and when he tells Lukey that he knows where Johnny is, Lukey is immediately excited because he wants Shell to bring Johnny to him so he can paint him because he's about to die, and he's never been able to paint someone who's about to die before. He's only been able to paint people who are full of life, and he wants to paint someone who's like knocking on death's door, who knows they're about to die, and he wants to get that raw emotion of painting someone like that. Shell at first isn't like too crazy about the idea, but he eventually, I think he leaves before he can agree to do it. He somehow finds a way out. So then Johnny, he gets up and he walks away before Shell can get to him, and he ends up stumbling into this bar where a bunch of people know him. And the bars have like little rooms attached to them for some reason, and he ends up going into one of the rooms and closing the door.
Did you see who came in?
Yes. Keep your mouth shut. Now, come on. Take this and get out of here.
I need to stay and rest.
And lying down on this seat. So the guy who owns the bar, the bartender, goes up to him and says, "Hey, you can't be here." And Johnny says, "Just give me till the bar closes. I just need to rest." And he agrees to do that. So as he's in the bar, Lukey also comes to the bar, and Shell also goes to the bar, but they don't see each other at first. Shell comes into the bar first, and he notices that he knows, based on what he's seen, that Johnny's in that room. And he tells the bartender, "Hey, look, I'm looking for my friend Johnny. I know he's really close to me, and if you don't let me take him out of here, I'm going to call the cops." So the bartender ends up agreeing to let Shell take him out. But before he can do that, Lukey notices Shell is there and starts like beating him because he lost his opportunity to paint Johnny. So he starts beating him and just battering him around, and then they end up getting locked into another separate room, and the bartender says, "Hey, look, Lukey, you messed up a lot of our stuff. You broke a lot of things. You owe us a lot of money." And Lukey says, "Well, I don't have that money. Like, I don't know what to do. Like, how can we settle this?" So he says, "Here, I have an idea." And they go into the other room. He says, "If you get Johnny into a car and get him out of here, then we can settle the debt. We can settle the debt, consider it cleared." So he does this. So he gets him in a car and he takes him back to his house so he can paint him. And when he gets to his house, there's a guy that they live with who went to school to be a doctor but never finished his schooling. And he ends up tending Johnny's wounds as best he can. He has some tools there that he can tend his wounds with. But as he's doing that, Lukey's painting him.
Why do you want to do this?
Because, Toba, there's something to be said about him before he dies.
And about all of us?
Because that's what he wanted. He wanted to paint him. After this, Johnny starts having hallucinations where he thinks he's talking to Father Tom, and he has a speech about how he was his mindset was different when he was a child than when he's an adult.
When I was a child, I spoke as a child. I thought as a child. I understood as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things.
It's at this point that an officer who had talked to Kathleen before and tried to warn her against going for Johnny, he comes into the church looking for Kathleen because he knows that she went there. And as he's talking to Father Tom, she is let out of the church, which she was staying at this point. And then as she's leaving the church, she goes to the docks where there's a boat, and there's a guy who's friendly to the Nationalists. And he says, "Look, if you can get Johnny here by 12, then you can go ahead. I can get you guys out of here and get you on the boat and then get you out of here. But after 12, the tide's just not going to be good enough. We're not going to be able to get out of here." Shell ends up taking a little bit of pity on Johnny because he really sees that Johnny's dying. Like, there's really not a lot of time left here. So he says, "Look, if I get you to Father Tom's, that's where Kathleen was, would you be able to get there if I try to walk you there?" And Johnny says, "Okay, sure." So he starts walking Johnny there, but he ends up getting tripped up somehow, and Johnny ends up walking by himself. Kathleen ends up finding Johnny, and they embrace each other, and they're just like, they're yards away from the boat, from where the boat is, but it seems like they're hundreds of miles away because of how slow Johnny can walk. And she says, "Come on, let's go, Johnny. I'm here, I'm with you. Let's go, we gotta get to the boat." So as they're walking to the boat, these police are coming up very slowly to where they are as they're walking to the boat. And they finally get to a point where she realizes they're not gonna make it to the boat. And she pulls out a gun from her pocket, she fires it at the police, and then they fire back and they kill both her and Johnny.
I'm here.
Is it far?
It's a long way, Johnny. But I'm coming with you. We're going away together.
And that is the entire movie. So what do I think of this movie? Wow, this movie is absolutely fantastic. Like, it is amazing. The acting is great. I'll be perfectly honest. Before, I want to say Lukey, I feel like I'm pronouncing his name wrong. But before Robert Newton came into the movie, I thought, okay, I'm gonna probably end up giving this movie like a 9.5, because I felt like the second half of the movie was going to be slow, and that it was gonna drag, and that the real action and the real punch was in the beginning of the movie. And then once Robert Newton comes on screen and he starts acting, and I'm like, this is a 10. This is a 10 out of 10. How can this not be? So the cinematography is actually absolutely fantastic. The story for me is unique in that I haven't, the closest I could say is Pepe Le Moco, where he is also a criminal who is kind of hiding in one area, but he is someone who like refuses to come out, and they'll get him when he comes out. In this one, Johnny is out, but he's just finding different places to hide as he's dying. James Mason delivers an amazing performance here. He doesn't have a lot of speaking parts, but you can really tell as the movie's going on that he's really in dire straits as we're going on. Like, he is definitely dying more and more as we're going along, to where at the end you don't even know how he's able to like stand or how he's able to even move. And it's just the way he's able to do this is fantastic. One of my favorite scenes in the beginning of the movie is where he's in that air raid, the little air raid depot, and he's hallucinating. The way they were able to do that was fantastic. There's actually another scene later on where he's in the bar, where he is in that room I told you about, that he went to the bar, and he knocks over a glass of beer, and there's like little beer bubbles on the table, and the beer bubbles are like his friends talking to him.
Sorry. Hold on, who are you? To the police car. What do you want? Come on, what are people doing here? Who are they?
I'll wait for you, Johnny.
I'm thinking of the decent man he killed.
Here we are. Come on, Miss Ray.
I'll wait for you, Johnny.
Like, he sees their faces and he sees them talking to him, and I'm like, how did they do this in 1947? It looked great. Like, I keep saying it looked absolutely amazing, because it did. The story is just fantastic. Like, I was on the edge of my seat through the whole movie. When the first part of the movie, you're on the edge of your seat of whether he's going to actually get away or not. But then later on, I'm not as worried about him getting away as I'm worried about, is he going to live? And I had the same moral dilemma as the people in this movie did, where you want him to live because he's gone through so much in this movie, but yet he's a killer, so you shouldn't want him to live because he killed people, but you do want him to live because I feel like I went on a journey with this man. I feel like I lived a part of his life with him, and that is absolutely crazy for a movie to be able to do that. To get my attention so much that I feel like I'm living this moment by moment with him is absolutely crazy. And then, like I said, when Robert Newton comes in, this guy, I've never heard of this Robert Newton before. I watched Henry V with Robert Newton, but he didn't have that big of a role. There was one scene where he had like a kind of a speech that he gave, but he didn't have that big of a part, at least I felt, in Henry V. I thought he was good in it, but then when I saw him in this movie, I thought, dang, this guy is great. How have I never heard of this guy before? He just stole the scene. He absolutely stole the parts of the movie that he's in. It's amazing. For them to be able to capture my attention with what James Mason is doing, and then without James Mason on the screen, they completely capture it with Robert Newton. It just was fantastic. I think he's also going to be in another movie, Oliver Twist, that I'm watching later on, so I can't wait to see him in that movie. I actually want to go watch his whole catalog just because he's that good. And then the ending of the movie is so heart-wrenching, because there was a part in the movie where I think it's Kathleen's mom. She says that the same thing happened to her, where her husband left like in a similar manner, and she never went out for him and she never found him, and she ended up living the rest of her life happy because she decided to live the rest of her life. Well, at the end, you think, okay, maybe Kathleen's going to do this too, because there's nothing that shows me that she's going to give her life up. And then when she does, it's heart-wrenching, because you realize, and she realized, that she actually can't live a happy life without him. If she lived a life without him, it would just be empty. And this is what she decides to do at the end, which is just heart-wrenching. The ending is so gutting, But you realize that for him, for Robert Newton, I mean, he went through all of this throughout the movie just to die at the end. It's like, I mean, in all honesty, what he did warrants him dying at the end. But you're like, oh man, I really thought maybe there was a chance he was going to get on that boat, and then he didn't. But that's kind of the reaction I had. It wasn't like, oh, this movie is ruined for me because he died. It was just like, oh man, I thought he was going to live and he didn't. But you're still fine with it because at least there's some kind of closure at the end of the movie. It's not just, the camera could have panned away and you never know what happened to him. Does Shane die in the end? Who knows? It could have been that type of ending, but it wasn't. It was still a satisfying ending, even though it wasn't, because it could have gone either way, and it was really fantastic. Like I said, won the first BAFTA award and definitely deserved it. I'm surprised Robert Newton wasn't nominated for something here. I don't think James Mason was either, but maybe I'm wrong. I haven't gone back and done my research on that. I just watched the movie and then I thought immediately I need to get to a microphone. I need to start talking about this movie because that's how great it is. Spectacular. Definitely a step up from a lot of the other stuff I've seen. Now, they consider this a film noir, but I don't know if that's true. I don't think it is. If it is, it's the best one I've seen so far. Out of the Past was my favorite, but if this is a film noir, this is number one now. But absolutely fantastic. And I think I said a little while ago that I have to give it a 10 out of 10, and that's the score it's going to get. So this is only the third 10 out of 10 that I've officially given so far. The Kid, Adventures of Robin Hood, and now Odd Man Out. Fantastic movie. Everyone should watch it. If you haven't watched it, I'm sorry I spoiled the ending for you. But when people watch my reviews, they have to know the spoilers in them because there's spoilers in all of them. But anyway, thank you. I hope you join me for my next review.